Despite being on Roblox, a platform notorious for lacking original ideas of any kind, Guts and Blackpowder is a fascinating and well-designed horde shooter. In this video, I hope to explain why I think Guts and Blackpowder is a breath of fresh air that subverts many of the trappings of the zombie genre. Guts and Blackpowder is set during the Napoleonic Wars in an alternate timeline of Earth's history. Its maps are set in various strongholds and battles across the Napoleonic Wars. From the snowy Battle of Berezina to the Siege of San Sebastian, the locations are varied in scope. You play as soldiers from various European nations such as Bavarians, Austrians, the French Empire, the United Kingdom, the Russian Empire, and many more. Before I begin, I'd like to give a massive thank you to the developers of Guts and Blackpowder for cooking up one of the best zombie games I've played in years, and PN Ponkler, Pilot Toaster, and Sionil for your thorough fan wiki on the game, as well as Fezzazin for clarifications to the wiki in question. Whenever I needed to authenticate something or fact check, your wiki was always there, and I'm truly thankful that such a wiki is maintained. This video wouldn't be possible without your research, so thank you very much. There are currently 7 playable classes in the game, 5 of which are free and unlocked from the start, and 2 of which are unlocked through playing the game. Each serves a unique purpose within the game, but each is simple enough that they can be learned rather quickly. I like the way the classes are designed because they epitomize the concept of a low skill floor with a high skill ceiling. When you start out, you may be able to kill a few zombies, but when somebody has gotten good enough at a class of their choice, I've seen them take out hordes upon hordes just by themselves alone. Each class is given a melee weapon, usually a saber, and a primary item or gimmick of the class. For 3 of the 7 classes, this is a gun, but for the other 4, it's a special item that only they can use, like construction equipment, musical instruments, or a crucifix or holy book. Your melee weapon is one of your most reliable sources of defense. Guns only have 1 shot, excluding one gun in particular, and need to be reloaded, which can take upwards of 10 seconds in many cases. Guns can kill in a single shot most times, which makes them invaluable when you need to hit an enemy from afar. In addition to this, they can pierce enemies, so if you aim correctly, you can kill multiple zombies with a single shot. Combat in Guts and Blackpowder is thoroughly reliant on the fact that whenever you attack, you need to try and kill multiple zombies in a single strike. Guts and Blackpowder servers only allow 20 people to play at once, and even at a full server you're going to be outnumbered dozens to 1. So, learning to use the limited resources at your disposal to your advantage is crucial to surviving in this game. It's a fascinating balancing act where you are constantly weighing the pros and cons of using a gun or using your melee. Using a gun means you are using your get out of melee free card, and you're going to have to find a time to reload it or leave yourself unable to defend yourself at range. But going into a brawl with the zombies means that they could grab you and possibly kill you, especially if there's many of them. So, you're constantly considering if the situation is dangerous enough that now is the time you should take the shot and bring an end to your assailants or risk using your saber. Another thing to mention is that each melee weapon swings in a direction you choose. By moving the mouse, you determine what direction it swings in. Swinging overhead ensures you'll hit the head of zombies and are more likely to kill in one hit, but it makes hitting multiple targets hard. Swinging left or right means that you can hit more zombies at once, but actually killing them will take more time in which you can get grabbed and torn apart by the horde. By making players really think about when they're going to use their gun, Guts and Blackpowder forces players into playing games of risk and reward the whole way through a match. Often, modern zombie games give players large clips of ammunition to shoot. You can fire round after round of ammo, killing droves of zombies with equal amounts of ammo. But by reducing the clip size to just 1 shot and making the reload speed very, very long, Guts and Blackpowder asks the question, you have 1 shot against the horde, how are you going to use it? One thing I feel that this game does excellently is the idea of being a part of a larger collective. Although being skilled is important to success, working with your teammates is crucial to winning as well. A single basic enemy, if they hit you, will manage to grab you, leaving you defenseless. A single enemy won't damage you, and you'll eventually break free of their grasp, and do away with them rather easily. But it's never just one enemy. Another will come and latch on, and you'll get killed, devoured by the ceaseless hordes of undead. Once you're grabbed, your death is practically assured. Unless you're saved by an ally.
I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. He's gotta be strong and he's gotta be fast and he's gotta be fresh from the fight. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the morning light. He's gotta be sure and he's gotta be soon and he's gotta be larger than life.
By making each zombie able to incapacitate a single player, it means that you need to stick together or you'll almost certainly die alone. By making everyone incredibly vulnerable on their own, Guts and Blackpowder means that sticking together as a unified force is the most efficient path to survival. While this is done in other Horde shooters like Left 4 Dead 2 and Deep Rock Galactic, it's turned up to 11 in Guts and Blackpowder. Even 2 zombies will be able to kill a player. So, using your individual abilities of your class to help your team out is crucial to survival as well. Speaking of classes, I'll go through every class in order, explaining their abilities and playstyle as well as the upgrades they can receive. The first class is Line Infantry. With a lengthy musket that can blast holes through your foes, the Line Infantry excels at doing damage to foes at a range. This is paired with the fact that the musket has a bayonet attached, which is far better than the saber you're also given. The bayonet has a longer range to attack with, and if used properly can fell a zombie in a single hit. It can attack from 2 different directions as opposed to the cutlass's ability to slice in all 4. However, it's a longer ranged melee and it's way safer to use than a saber. In addition, when an officer declares a charge, you can charge with the bayonet and triple the damage you'd normally do, killing any zombie you run into instantly. A bayonet charge is by far one of the most lethal things that you have access to as a line infantry, and it's one of the most powerful melees in the game, if not the most powerful. The line infantry also has access to several different kinds of upgrades. You can choose to replace your musket with a carbine, a gun with a shorter barrel and a quicker reload. The carbine also grants you the ability to shove zombies, which can stun them for a short amount of time. It does slightly less damage with its shot than the musket does, with one shot from the carbine doing about 3/4 the amount of damage a musket would do. But since its reload is much quicker, you can shoot at a faster rate, so it kind of balances out. However, lacking a bayonet is a really bad thing for the carbine, which makes it way weaker in terms of its melee output. The other weapon you can replace your musket with is the lance, a fast attacking weapon that replaces your musket with a long-ranged pike that attacks quickly and can keep zombies at bay. The trade-off is that you don't have a gun anymore, so you're ineffective at range. In addition, you can replace your saber with a hand axe, which deals more damage than a saber, but is less effective against larger groups and zombie sappers. More on that later. Guts and Blackpowder's upgrades are more side grades than actual upgrades, granting you the ability to get some really powerful benefits out of a weapon, but doing away with some of the core abilities that the stock counterpart would give you. So, the line infantry is a good beginner character, having solid offensive options as well as a bayonet to defend yourself more safely than other classes might be able to. They pair really well with the next class on the list, the officer. The officer is described as short-ranged and melee-focused by the game. The officer mainly serves as a melee support role, since your pistol isn't great at long range. It does have the quickest reload in the game, however, which is really good because it means that you can fire it and the actual act of reloading carries less consequence. It also works well because the officer's main focus is on melee combat. The officer also has a charge bar, which allows them to build up a charge by dealing with damage with their pistol and officer's saber. When the bar is full, the officer can declare a charge, granting themselves and everyone nearby a movement boost, immunity to being grabbed, and an increase to their melee attack speed. This is by far one of the most powerful abilities in the game. It's entirely possible and plausible that a single charge can turn the tide of a game, with your small group managing to fight back against the hordes in a desperate last stand. However, this charge doesn't make you immune to being damaged, so it's not uncommon to see people clubbed to death by the hordes as a result of a charge. The only upgrade the officer has is the double-barreled pistol. As opposed to other weapons, which are more side grades than upgrades, the double pistol is an explicitly better version. It has a slightly longer reload, but it gives you a second shot. This is the only weapon that has a magazine size larger than one. It's incredibly expensive at 2,500 francs and is basically an upgrade to base pistol. In most lobbies, there's around 1 to 3 officers, with most people preferring to play the line infantry or the seaman. Like the previous two, the seaman is one of the most popular and best classes in the game. They're given a saber like the line infantry, but their blunderbuss truly is the star of the show. The blunderbuss is by far the best crowd control option in the game. It's loaded with pellets, and when fired, it can tear through an entire crowd of zombie. Its spray shoots 15 pellets, each of which can tear through the horde. A single shot can give a heck of a lot of breathing room, which is really useful in tight spots. It splits the horde of zombies like Moses splits the Red Sea, and when you fire it, you practically feel like a miracle worker. With that being said, the blunderbuss does have a time-consuming reload, so choosing when to fire your lead-powered miracles is a thing worth thinking about. The Seaman has 2 upgrades, the hand axe for melee and the knock gun for ranged. The knock gun fires 7 bullets in a straight line, killing most anything in that area. It's one of the most powerful guns in the game when used correctly. Whereas the blunderbuss fires in a conical pattern, the knock gun fires in a straight line, and practically anything in the way will meet its end. It's hard to line up the zombies to shoot them with the knock gun, so the gun is not terribly practical. The knock gun does have the longest reload in the game, clocking in at 24 seconds to reload the entire thing. You have to reload each bullet, so a common strategy amongst knock gun users is to load a few bullets and let that do the work instead. People calculated how many zombies the knock gun could kill with one shot on a fully loaded clip, and the grand total came to 77 zombies with a single shot, with 11 zombies killed per bullet. It's a really dangerous gun, and in the right hands can be a lifesaver for your team. The musician is one of the least popular classes, but it's one of the best classes to have if it's played properly. The musician is given a musical instrument as well as a saber. They have to play a rhythm minigame, playing a little song to alert other players to the effect. The better the rhythm kept by the musician, the more effective the buff. The buffs themselves don't stack on one another. Having a whole woodwind section to accompany your zombie killing won't do much of anything. While the other players are near the musician, they'll get a buff depending on what the instrument is. Flutes speed up reloading by up to 20%, which is really useful in a game where reloading is an incredibly lengthy process that requires a lot of deliberation on when to do it. It's extra useful on teams with a lot of gun characters like line infantry and seamen. The other instrument you can get is the drum, which can increase the swing speed of melee weapons by up to 35%. It's incredible because it's not reliant on guns, but melee weapons, a type of weapon possessed by every class in the game. In addition, it stacks with the officer's charge, meaning that a musician's drum beat and an officer's charge can turn a few soldiers into a steel tornado quite easily. The final instrument available to musicians is the bugle. Unlike the rhythm set by fife and drums, the bugle requires you to build up a bar to activate it by doing damage. When it's filled, you can blow on the bugle, giving players a 20-second damage buff, doubling the damage of all attacks after a 5-second windup. I cannot express how powerful this thing is. Double damage means that you can kill standard zombies with a singular sword swing. Despite being slept on for having a relatively boring playstyle, a good musician main can put spur in their ally's step, a step that may get them far enough to ensure their team finds their way to safety. The last of the starting classes is the sapper. The sapper is about as popular as officers. Usually, on a team, you get 1 to 2 sappers. Despite lacking a gun, the sapper can protect their allies by building barricades, wooden stakes, and caltrops. Instead of a gun, they receive a hammer. They can build and maintain their buildings with their hammer. Each of these serves a specific strategic niche. Barricades provide a standard defense against zombies. They can get broken down as zombies will swarm the barricades, but you can repair them with the hammer. Stakes serve as barricades, but they can deal a good bit of damage to the zombies that attack them. Because of this, they can serve as a good trap to deal with zombies. However, they're not as strong as the barricades themselves and break way easier. Caltrops serve as a way to slow down zombies. Despite the fact that they used to deal damage, they only slow the zombies down now. It's a good building to place in choke points, since you can slow zombies down and let the gunslingers, like the officers, line infantry, and seamen, shoot them down. In addition, the sapper has an axe. The sapper's axe is super duper good. It's incredibly useful to clear the dead off your barricades given its high damage. Like the carbine, it can also shove zombies, which stuns them momentarily. The sapper has a few upgrades to be purchased, that being the siege armor and the pickaxe. The pickaxe serves better as a single target weapon, dealing high damage, the highest of any melee weapon in the game. It isn't great for dealing with hordes, but it's the highest damage from any melee weapon, doing more damage than the carbine rifle and the pistol as well. The thing hits like a truck. The other item you can get as a sapper is the siege engineer armor. The thing is, the siege engineer armor it's consumable. If you die while wearing it, it's gone. It reduces your move speed as well as the damage you take from zombies. It costs 100 francs, so it might not necessarily be worth it. Honestly, focus on buying permanent items first. There's two other classes in the game that you can't unlock initially, that being the surgeon and the priest. Both are support roles and both are unlocked through achievements. The surgeon doesn't have any upgrades and they don't have a gun, but they do have medical supplies, utter lifesavers in a game so riddled by death, such as Guts and Blackpowder. They can offer to heal other players who are at low health, and if the player accepts, you begin a lengthy healing animation that slowly regenerates your patient's health. It's a really useful thing, since you can bring your allies away from the brink of death. In addition, you have a box of bandages you can place. It regenerates in endless mode, but on objective maps, it doesn't regenerate. Choosing when and where to place the bandages is important, because it means that you don't need to be around to heal your allies. However, having a box of bandages is an incredibly useful thing because it means that players can use the bandages to heal themselves. To place the bandages and heal your allies, you'll need supplies. You can get supplies by picking up the rags of dead zombies, which isn't a very sanitary way of healing, but still. So, the surgeon must go into combat, sometimes in service of healing their allies. As a surgeon, helping in fights is something you're probably going to have to do, but sticking to the backlines and healing your allies is also helpful. You don't need many surgeons, but having a surgeon to spare is a really useful thing indeed. The priest class is the hardest class to unlock. You gotta do a million different things to unlock it, but it's a really useful class, being able to turn the tide quite easily if it's played correctly. You only have one damaging weapon, a wooden stake. It deals pitiful damage, and it's the only weapon you've got. You do have one ace in the hole, that being the crucifix. The crucifix is excellent. By brandishing the cross, you scare any zombies, getting them to recoil away from you. It's really useful since you can stop their attack, either to respond with a counteroffensive on your team, or to hold them off long enough to complete some key objective, or just to run. In addition, you can cure your allies of the plague with a holy book, because if you get bit or harmed by a zombie, you get infected. Being able to cure your allies of the zombie plague is really useful. Having even one priest on your team is very, very helpful, but due to the scarcity of people who have unlocked the class, it's not often a commonly chosen class. The game wouldn't be a zombie game without having zombies in it, so I'm going to discuss the variety of zombies quickly. Shamblers are the run-of-the-mill club or grab-you zombies. They die relatively easily and make up most of the zombie population. They're not super dangerous on their own, but rare are the times when they're alone. Runners are dangerous, even on their own. You can tell if they're a runner if they've got glowing red eyes and run, because they're a runner. They die in one hit, and they only attack in one way, by leaping at you and tackling you onto the ground. If you're caught in this way, your allies have about 4 seconds to kill the runner or you'll die. It's really dangerous, but if you time a swing or a shot from your gun well, it'll die just like any other zombie. If a player is zombified after death, they're turned into a runner. Bombers have a torch and a barrel of gunpowder. You'll never guess what a bomber does. Honestly, if you know how to handle them, they're more of an asset than a hindrance. Kill one with a well-placed shot, and they'll kill all the zombies nearby. Just make sure your allies are out of the blast radius, though. If they're near you, they'll light the fuse, and you've got a few seconds to run. This is rather useful, since you can kite them into other zombies and have them kill their friends for you. Igniters are the worst. They throw a Molotov at you and your friends and burn you alive. They're not super dangerous, but by lighting you on fire, they can stop you from shooting your gun, swinging your saber, or doing anything of any real value. They're a real pain and can force you into a tough spot. It's not hard to spot an igniter out of the crowd, due to the burns on their body. Again, they're not terribly dangerous on their own, but when they're one more variable in the flesh puzzle of the Horde, they don't exactly make things easier. However, like the bomber, they can make life harder for their allies because their Molotovs damage zombies as well. Finally, zombie sappers, or zappers as they're sometimes called, are dangerous. They can take off half of somebody's health in a single swing of their axe, and have high health and damage. If a sapper is zombified, they return as a zapper. They can break sapper fortifications down easily, so be wary of that as well. They have the highest health out of any zombie, and are by far the most dangerous, even if they're on their own. Most zombies aren't super hard to deal with on their own, but when they've congregated to attack, as they usually do, you're not in a good situation to deal with them anytime. The game is currently split into 3 modes: Objective, Endless, and Holdout. I'm going to discuss each individual map, and then discuss its significance with the Guts and Blackpowder lore, because it wouldn't be a deep dive if there wasn't lore, now would it? The timeline of Guts and Blackpowder occurs roughly between 1812 and 1815, in an alternate timeline of Earth's history. Everything up to the Battle of Berezina has stayed roughly the same, but the timeline begins to diverge around the November of 1812. The infection began roughly around November 19th, 1812. This is roughly a week before the Battle of Berezina, as confirmed by one of the developers. Hell is filled up, and the sinners have crawled up from their graves. We know that the zombies are affected by Christianity and that the infection is a biblical one due to the fact that the infection itself can be slowed by blessings from a priest. Survivors tend to hole up in churches to avoid the zombies, as churches are sanctified ground. And finally, we know that zombies are repelled by a cross, so we know that it's a biblical infection. I think the reason the infection itself was so dangerous was because the zombies themselves were crawling up from graves, meaning that everyone who had died up until this point had a chance to come back. Despite the zombies showing up in massive droves, the Napoleonic Wars remain ongoing and keep going for another year, until a ceasefire is called after the destruction of Leipzig in October of 1813. More and more locations began to fall to the scourge, such as Tyrol in 1814 and Waterloo in 1815. Around 1814 to 15, Paris was evacuated, but beyond that we don't know much about the circumstances surrounding the evacuation. From what I can make of the lore, around 1815 much of Europe is gone to the scourge. Whether or not people survive after that point, I do not know. The game is steeped in religious iconography, and I'm very interested to see where they go with the lore from here, whether it's better or worse. Given how the latter half of the timeline is growing more dire, it's going to be an interesting thing to see how things go. Objective mode maps are similar to the campaign maps in the game Left 4 Dead. You proceed through an area with your allies, killing the undead as you go. Eventually, you make your way to the end after fighting a horde or two, and you escape. at least hopefully. The dead don't stop attacking, and if you and your team can't complete the objectives quickly enough, it's almost inevitable that you'll be overwhelmed and killed. There are 5 objective maps in the game right now: Vardahus Fortress, Saint-Sébastien, Leipzig, Cobb, and the Catacombs de Paris. Most of these maps have a couple of points where people can respawn at half health, so even if you're killed, you can come back at a later point. With that being said, death still has consequences, since a death means that you're 1 soldier fewer to fight the hordes, and that can make all the difference. At the time of writing, objective modes are closer to the beginning of the timeline, when the infection hadn't overrun Europe just yet. The exception to this rule is the Catacombs map, occurring around late 1814 to early 1815. Saint-Sébastien is one of the earliest campaign maps in the timeline. In early 1813, an outbreak in the city led to a 3-way truce amongst the French, Portuguese, and British forces, having to fight their way through the city of Saint-Sébastien to signal the passing HMS Undaunted to escape. To evacuate, 1 player must sacrifice themselves to lower the others down a lift. A lot of this game has its design taken from Left 4 Dead, especially due to the fact that it started out its life as a Left 4 Dead Roblox game. Saint-Sébastien is one of the most popular objective maps in Guts and Blackpowder due to its light palette. Many Guts and Blackpowder maps are rather dark and set during the night time, but since Saint-Sébastien is bright, it's easier to navigate and more popular as a result. In addition, it's just a really well-designed map and takes a while to play through. Vardahus Fortress is the shortest objective map and one of the easiest to beat. Unlike other objective maps, this map is so short that it doesn't actually have a respawn point. Due to its simplicity, it's not a bad introduction to objective maps. The map focuses on a group of soldiers in the Kingdom of Norway, dragging themselves out of the cold front and signaling a ship, the HMS Undaunted, the very same one in Saint-Sébastien, to pick them up, while holding off hordes of zombies. During the last stand, the song Winter by Antonio Vivaldi plays. Guts and Blackpowder does something really cool with many of its campaign maps, where it'll use classical songs that would have already been composed in-universe as its soundtrack. Vivaldi's Seasons were some of his most well-known works. However, Winter is by far the most popular of the quartet. Composed in 1725, this articulate and alacritous string section of a song have been appreciated by concertgoers for nearly 300 years. Next year, in 2025, Vivaldi's Seasons will be 300 years old. Facing down the undead with an orchestral motif such as this one on a cold front is tonally perfect. Vardahus Fortress is said to be around the middle of the timeline, occurring some point around 1813 or 1814. Leipzig is a pretty fun map with a rather linear progression. The entire map takes place on the streets of Leipzig, excluding the church you begin in and the bar you head through to reach the upper level street. Where other maps have you traversing through myriad structures, homes, and strongholds, Leipzig doesn't feel that way. Many objective maps involve fleeing. Saint-Sébastien and Vardahus are both reliant on signaling the same ship in lore, but Leipzig is different. Leipzig was based on the Battle of Leipzig in 1813. I didn't mention it, but another name for the battle was the Battle of Nations. 400,000 rounds of artillery fire were expended over the course of the battle, and of the 560,000 soldiers who participated, over 100,000 wouldn't be returning home. This battle was so massive that it was the largest battle in Europe prior to the events of World War I. And as weird as it is, Leipzig, as in the map, feels like it's war-torn. The infection broke out a year before the events of Leipzig, but the war continued on despite this. Only after such a massive loss of human life was an armistice called. In the game, several maps have burnt out or burning buildings, but Leipzig works because it's set during the action. You're in the thick of it, and you have to keep running. There's even a point where you have to grab torches and light them on a burning building so you can destroy the barricades that are in your way. After fighting your way down the streets, you eventually come to a graveyard, and you have to fortify before the dead attack. It's a really terrifying part of the game, but eventually you make it out, going through a burning wreckage as you do. You cross a bridge covered in gunpowder and explosives, and after you cross, it explodes. It's actually a reference to the real Battle of Leipzig, wherein a French officer blew up a bridge. It's really good stuff. All in all, Leipzig has a fair amount of lore significance within the Guts and Blackpowder storyline, and is one of the most oppressive maps in a game that has an already oppressive atmosphere. Whereas Leipzig felt dangerous and war-torn, Cobb feels dreary and bleak. The map is based off the town of Cobb in Germany, and is set during the winter. The soldiers must travel through the town, gathering supplies on their cart. Eventually, they have to make their way into a courtyard wherein a cannon stands before them. To progress, they have to shoot the cannon to destroy some barricades. The reason I bring this up is it's because it's one of the most deceptively hard areas in the game. It's impressively tough. Most players don't even know how to load the cannon, and there's zombies swarming in from 3 separate directions. So even if you manage to break down the barricades, there's a bridge full of zombies waiting for you there on the other side. Anyone who's played a few matches of Cobb can tell you that many teams fail here. If it wasn't for the climax, I'd call this the toughest combat in any objective map. Should the soldiers survive, they eventually head into the fortress of Pfalzgrafenstein Castle. The castle itself is a real place, and it looks really cool. You make your way to the top of the castle, talk with the infected officer before he turns, and his last words are instructing you to kill the prisoners in the basement. The infected prisoners, specifically. Prior to the events of Cobb, a group of citizens rounded up a bunch of other citizens they presumed infected, and locked them in the basement of Pfalzgrafenstein as a way of quarantining them. As it turns out, one of them was infected, and they turned the others. So, you have to head into the basement and deal with them. The final combat in Cobb's occurs in a circular stairwell, with an orchestral rendition of Ode to Joy by Ludwig van Beethoven accompanying the attack. It's kind of a horrid sight, with the zombies breaking down barricade after barricade. I like that it's foreshadowed in a sense, as the organ plays a quieter rendition of Ode to Joy in the church where the map begins. Provided you can survive, victory is at hand. The Catacombs of Paris are a smaller map, taking place during the evacuation of Paris in 1814-15. The soldiers must fight their way through the catacombs, eventually finding their way out to the Seine Canal and Notre Dame. The bridge is barricaded with no actual way to bypass it, and a French soldier on the top of the barricades tells you to hold out while the citizens are evacuated. One thing I really like about Guts and Blackpowder is that the languages you'd find in a map are found there. A map in France will have words written in French. A map in Germany will have words written in German. It's not just English from various European nations, it's people speaking whatever languages make sense for the area. This applies to the writing you find in the maps as well. In addition, the devs are adding a callout system similar to Left 4 Dead's or Team Fortress 2's, and they're doing it in the languages spoken by the regiments, from Scottish Gaelic to German. It's going to be subtitled, of course, but it's a really nice detail, and one I truly appreciate. Guts and Blackpowder is filled with little things like this, historical references or details that just make sense. I figured I'd bring it up because I really do appreciate it. Anyways, you're left to fight against the endless hordes of undead while the remaining population of Paris evacuates. Eventually, the 1812 Overture by Tchaikovsky plays. The overture itself is well known due to the fact that cannons are required to play it. The cannons are used as percussive instruments within a performance. The fight against the dead is straightforward but fun. Typically, a crew of riflemen and sappers are deployed to the front lines, whereas the support classes stick to the back, loading the cannons and providing artillery support. It's a really fun fight, and eventually a boat will come by to pick you up after the bells of Notre Dame chime. The danger in this is that the boat is moving, so you'll actually need to jump on it over the bridge. You can get left behind if you're too late, and you'll die in the river if you jump too early. The Catacombs is a very fun map, and one of the shorter objective maps, just longer than Vardahus. Endless Mode, on the other hand, is a wave-based defense mode. Zombies show up every round, and you need to survive them by any means necessary. Each wave grows in difficulty, but everyone who died in the previous wave comes back during the next one, so waiting to respawn is relatively quick. Endless Mode is a good way to learn the game, as the quicker respawn times and a lack of objectives mean you can just play the game without the hassle of dealing with any objectives. As a matter of fact, the game initially only had one endless map, and that was the entire game. In any case, endless isn't such a bad way to learn the ropes. Sappers are practically invaluable on endless because they can fortify positions and make strongholds for you and your team, which can prove to be quite useful when the undead number in the hundreds and even the thousands. Hugomont was the first map in the game, and it was an endless map. Back then, it wasn't really an endless mode, so much as it was the only mode. There's 3 main entry points, but the zombies usually use the main 2. The trouble is that they're on either sides of the map, so your team is forced to split their resources or fortify one position and bottleneck yourselves against the onslaught. You can climb up on the walls and shoot those zombies that are moving towards the entrance, like a visceral versions of Balloon's tower defense. Climbing up on the wall or the barn roof is kind of horrifying because, well, you certainly can shoot one of the zombies, maybe 2 if you're lucky. But since the shot is angled, you're not going to be able to kill a lot of them. Watching them all converge on the entrance is horrifying to behold. Most of the time, a game on Hugomont will go a little something like this. The group splits off with around 2/3 of the players defending the walled entrance and the other 1/3 defending the hallway entrance. Eventually, the hallway entrance falls and everyone retreats back to this little area, where they usually try holding out for as long as they can. Personally, I think the strategy is a little lame. It'd be more interesting to try and fortify the house or somewhere else, but that's just me. All in all, Hugomont is your basic run-of-the-mill endless map, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. In terms of its lore, it's one of the final 2 holdouts at Waterloo, according to the Wiki. The map is set during 1815, and you're one of the final few soldiers forced to take down the dead for one final night. Hold out for as long as you can, and take down as many of them with you as possible. La Ferme d'en Haut is similar to Hugomont, but it feels a little more like a siege than Hugomont did. Hugomont was dark, so shooting the zombies as they clambered towards your stronghold was not an easy or enjoyable task. However, La Ferme d'en Haut is baked in this reddish sunset, so seeing the zombies isn't as tough. It's a really fun map, and I feel that it did some really interesting things with its map design. For one, the main 2 entry points are connected by a couple of hallways in a middle courtyard. Also, there's cannons mounted near either hallway, so you can try and shoot these zombies as they approach the entrances. As they spawn across the river, you can try shooting them as they're charging you, which really does make it feel more siege-like. The various hallways and locales of the compound are interesting, and it gives a lot of cool places to fight around. The map is modeled after the Battle of Ligny, which happened in 1815 in the real world. I'm not actually sure if the battle would have happened in the Guts and Blackpowder timeline, given the armistice in 1813 due to the zombies. Vardahus Fortress is a bit of an odd map since it's also a campaign map. Its endless mode doesn't let you reach the lighthouse or the docks. It's a more clustered map with a series of houses and a small courtyard. The actual space you navigate on Vardahus is relatively small relative to the other maps. I don't have a lot to say about Vardahus, but the layout is interesting since there's the main base and the church down the pathway. Despite being able to climb down anywhere, the zombies seem to prefer entering at only specific points, making fortification a bit annoying to actually figure out what goes where. In any case, Vardahus is an okay map, but I never really found it to be cool. It's too cramped, and I feel the fact that it's also a campaign map means that it had to be designed for both modes, which as such, both versions of the map suffered in terms of their quality. Vardahus Fortress is based on the real Vardahus Fortress in Norway. La Haye Saint is probably my second least favorite endless map. I think my main gripe with it is the entry points. There's only 2 main entry points, so the group is split up similar to Hugomont. However, there's nothing really interesting to it in between. You're just fighting zombies at a choke point the whole way through. You can't actually leave the entry point as the zombies are coming through like you can on Hugomont or La Ferme, so you're just waiting for them to show up like it's a shooting gallery. Eventually, they break through and everyone fortifies the farmhouse loft, holding out there until they overwhelm the forces. It's not very interesting, and the scenarios and actual places you fight in don't provide any real variety. It's a real place, having been an important part of the Battle of Waterloo. In the timelines of Guts and Blackpowder, it's one of the 2 final strongholds in Waterloo that fall to the Scourge of the Dead. A journal can be found, detailing the events that have transpired.
We intercepted the Horde at a small farmhouse called La Haie Sainte. We have appeared to have thwarted the Blight. News from a similar location has also led us to the conclusion that orders to successfully halt the advance of the Hordes have been fulfilled. However, I feel as if we've apprehended a flock of sheep rather than an entire nation of cannibals. My last entry stands incorrect. Another horde has descended upon La Haie Sainte in a minor siege. No men seem to have been lost. 3 men dead, none of them English. The horde swarmed over one and ate him as if he was a mutton chop. The vision of him kicking and screaming still echoes clearly in my head, as if it were the present. The Germans cleared them off, what little remained of him. He arose again as if he'd heard the bugle calls, his uniform red and tattered but still recognizable from where I stood, and darted for his officer, before a soldier standing behind him put a musket ball through his already mangled head. More men lost. Rain began to pour down, and our muskets are proving themselves too damp to be used. The hordes come far more frequently now, leaving me less time to write. We've taken position outside to pick them off. Myself and 3 others remain at one of the cannibals.
While this is but one example of the environmental storytelling, much of the lore can be parsed through messages left on the maps, either by journals, notes, or desperate messages written hastily on the wall. I'm not sure if the wall messages have a specific name, but they're practically intrinsic to zombie media. You can't swing a zombie without hitting a sign saying, "The end is near, burn the dead, repent," or some similar nihilistic sentiment about the end of the world. It's a classic zombie fare, and I'm really glad that it's included in Guts and Blackpowder, for what it's worth. Although it's one of the less interesting endless maps, I'm still glad it's in the game. Tyrolean Village, on the other hand, is peak. The location itself is really interesting, being an abandoned, burnt-out village at the top of a mountain. Given how most maps have stayed as horizontal flat plains, Tyrol itself is a far more vertical location, with a beautiful view and a simple layout. There's a lot of little quadrants, but since the map itself is packed and divided into these 4 main quadrants by its crossroads, navigation through the map is easy and keeps the fighting interesting. In addition, it really doesn't suffer from people camping in one location, because while that's certainly considered the strategy, the actual map itself is much smaller than the other maps. The village is based off of Tyrol, a region of the Alps which revolted against the French occupation of their homeland in 1809. Tyrolean Village was added in the latest update, and it's a really well-designed map with a lot of vertical buildings to snipe off of, various places to skirmish in and around, and a layout that's an interesting challenge to fortify and navigate. A letter can be found in this map, detailing the harrowing events suffered by the soldiers. It's translated by Chunkurma from its original language, so thank you Chunkurma for the translation, and thank you Wiki writers for editing the translation.
It's been just legs since we passed through Württemberg. They line all roads, north, south, east. What little command remains has the goal of passing through the Alps, splitting out up north. This'll certainly work for the Austrians, but I fear the worst for my dearest Bavaria. There weren't as many of them in Württemberg, but Stuttgart was gone. We've come across few in the mountains, but every town we march into is depleted. I pray every night that this evil doesn't reach Munich, if it hasn't already. It's as if every day half our manpower is lost either by brute force or as their sickness catches up to one of us. As I write this, we found ourselves settling down in one of many villages. The locals are several weeks gone. Dried blood stains on the wall indicate that this village fell to the blight. We hardly forage enough to keep ourselves fed. The Jaegers pushed through the pass and believe they've spotted a giant mass of them marching. They'll trudge through this town and find us regardless of our hiding. It'll be a massacre. I write this note with the belief I'll be dead tomorrow. I don't plan to desert. I'm tired of running. The others are still oblivious, believing that they'll pass through without a hitch. I will defend this village with my life, and surely we'll all fall. When we do, I hope we'll make an even greater dent to their numbers. Final regards, Erhard Dentlinger of the 5th von Preysing.
All in all, Tyrolean Village is by far my favorite survival map, and should you try this game out, it's the one I'd thoroughly recommend the most. Holdout mode only has one map currently, that being Berezina. The map functions as a combination of endless and objective mode, where you have to survive while you complete an objective. In the case of Berezina, you need to build a bridge across an icy river so that Napoleon may cross it. You need to defend against the increasing number of zombies, build the bridge, and manage your crew's hypothermia from the exposure to the elements. It truly feels like a synthesis of the previous two modes, giving you an actual objective as opposed to surviving just against the waves of undead, but grounding you in a singular location you'll have to fortify while you build the bridge so Napoleon Bonaparte may pass. Berezina seems to me like it's what an FPS version of the game Frostpunk might be like. For those not in the know, Frostpunk is a city builder set in an alternate world where the Ice Age occurred in the 1800s. You have to juggle morals, your citizen, and your furnace heating your burgeoning town. Out of every map, Berezina is one of the hardest because you need to deal with the cold, the zombies, and the bridge, and more than that, you'll need to actually organize your team. Many folks will be more than happy to simply fortify the houses and expect the others to do the bridge building, but if we don't build the bridge, then we lose. Guts and Blackpowder is a game with cooperation beating at its heart, and Berezina serves as a good challenge for those trying to cooperate. I've never actually beat this map because the team never coordinates. Everything I said about the other maps in cooperation is cranked up to 11 here, and it feels like it. This feels like the canon section on Cobb, but it's like that the entirety of the playthrough. Berezina is actually based off of a real-world battle that happened during the Napoleonic Wars, that being the Battle of Berezina. It's a phenomenal map, combining what makes endless and objective mode good, and is balanced in such a way that you never feel like you lost because of an unfair reason, but more because you lost because you made the wrong decision. I also feel that building a bridge is kind of horrifying because you look how far it is building currently and realize how far you have to go. Berezina is the ultimate challenge, and it's really, really, really well made. When I started writing this video, I wasn't sure if it was going to be as long as it turned out to be. I've spent a lot of time playing the game and even more time writing about playing the game. It's unique though. Can you imagine being the devs for this game and having the Guts and Blackpowder to look at the classic 4 people against the world Horde Shooter formula and just say fuck it, now there's 20 of you, all of you suck, have fun fighting a bajillion zombies? It's unique, well designed, and does something new by blending Revolutionary Era War Simulator with zombie shooting mechanics. Given how Roblox is kind of a terrible platform for a myriad number of reasons, seeing a game of this quality in a place like Roblox is a breath of fresh air. I don't really have more to say than that. It's a really fun game. It's tough, but certainly winnable if you know what you're doing. I know there's some stuff I missed, from the secret Headless Horseman boss fight, to the various cosmetic packs in the old guard, to the professional level art direction and cohesive art style, to who knows what else. This video is meant to be a general overview, and if there's anything I'd want you to take away from this video, it's that you should give Guts and Blackpowder a shot. Just be careful though, because you'll need to spend 11 seconds reloading afterwards.